Okay, everyone, we're now in the push-ups part of push-ups with pizza. Obviously, still recovering from the big chicken sandwich off last night. So let's just jump right into this one, special daylight edition. I did not feel like bringing the light up from the basement because I'm lazy like that. Today's topic is going to be variety schmariety. I had a client today ask me, Shank, what do you think about using a wide variance or wide variety of movements with people? And I said, well, like all things, it depends. If I am working with a beginner, this obviously is the Ghostbuster side, right? I'm not a huge fan of variety with beginners as far as exercise selection. Here's why. Exercise is a skill. It's not a hugely complex skill. It's not like teaching someone how to play tennis or soccer or wrestle or box, or they do MMA and they have to wrestle, box, do judo, and everything else thrown in between. But weightlifting is still a skill. And it requires a certain degree of practice to get enough of proficiency out of it to maximize your results and be as efficient as possible. If you go around bouncing from exercise to exercise, regardless of whatever your rationale is, you're going to lose something out. The analogy I always use is imagine if you wanted to learn French. And one day you studied French, and the next day you learned Italian, the next day you learned Mandarin, and the next day after that you learned Japanese, and the next day after that you learned, Farsi. You're not going to, and then by the fifth day you're back to French. You're not going to get very far in your French study because you're bouncing around all over the place, never building a consistent skill level in any one thing. So the second thing also is separation. Did I spell that right? Whatever. You guys know I can't spell. Separation. One of the things I talk about all the time in my videos, seems like a contradiction when I say I don't use a lot of variety, is that muscles work through multiple ranges and planes of motion. Here's an example. Because human beings are not apes, we have to manipulate tools to make up for a lack of body size and strength. Right? That's why human beings have a pec muscle, which has fibers around the sternum, which brings the arm this way. It's got fibers around the clavicle, which bring the arm that way. And it's got fibers down by the rib area that bring the arm this way. I just got done doing a thing about the biceps, right? So you have a long and a short head of the bicep. The long head does elbow flexion from all the way to here, and when the palm is up, and when the arm comes in across the body. And the short head does flexion when the arm is here, and the palm is rotating in that position, with the elbow out wide. Yes, we do have multiple divisions of muscles, hamstrings. They both extend. You can't see this. This is a horrible angle. But they extend the hip and they bend the knee, right? So doesn't this seem like a contradiction to what I'm saying, how the human body works? Why don't you use a wide variance of movements if the human body is capable of doing so many things? And the reason why is, number one, is you have to be good at a lot of exercise. This really bothers me. Is that really how you spell separation? Let's find out. This is terrible. Damn it, I spelled it wrong. I can't spell. Separation. There you go. All right. Well, look, I may not be that bright, but at least I can learn. Separation. Yeah, okay, separation process. I'm divorced. I think I know how to spell separation. But either way, separation. It requires a certain degree of skill to use a wide variety of exercises. You don't have that skill because you're a beginner in exercise. Not to mention, this sounds kind of crazy, but whenever I watch a beginner, whether they're doing a bench press or an incline press, whether they're doing a bicep curl from here to here, it doesn't seem like they are very good at emphasizing one aspect of a muscle over another. It's almost like the entire muscle works whether they like it or not, regardless of whatever angle they're at. It's as though their body is not differentiated enough. It's not skilled enough to make maximal usage of the efficiencies that are built into it. So to do a bench press versus an incline press versus a decline press, to work sternal, clavicular, and costal, just doesn't seem to matter very much for beginners based on my experience. They just don't have that skill level. So why bother going to that, especially if you know they can't do the exercises correctly in the first place? In fact, I'll get down to this later I'll get back to later. And then the other thing is focus. A big part of, remember, we live in an obesogenic environment. We've got tons of high calorie, high taste, low energy expenditure varieties out there as far as our food and our exercise. Which means if you're going to be a fit person in an obesogenic society, you got to have a lot of focus. And if you're bouncing around from exercise to exercise to exercise, and every time you come in here, until exercise becomes a habit, if every time you come into the gym, you're doing something different, I find it really screws up with people's ability to focus on everything. Right? Now, there are some exceptions to this. I'll get into it a little bit. But for the most part, I like people to be focused on, all right, I do this on this day now. When you're an intermediate, you're advanced, and you can handle more variety, great. But for a beginner, I find not just from a learning standpoint, the skill of exercise, but just from keeping them mentally focused and getting them, guess what? The most important thing is not motivation. It's not watching Rocky training montages to psych yourself up. Everyone who's out of shape and overweight all think it's about motivation, and it's not. It's about habits. And part of building habits is having a focus on doing specific things day in and day out, say, become a part of you. I've talked about this in the past. If I go eat a bowl of ice cream, it's so not a habit for me these days. My stomach hurts the next day, and all I want to do is go eat my oatmeal with honey and a protein shake, or all I want to do is have my hash browns and egg whites the next day, because it's not part, ice cream's awesome, but it's not part of my habit schedule. And habits are that powerful. When you get out of them, they create a great deal of disruption in your life. So I'm a huge fan of just from the fact of focus to have people use the same exercise, at least for the first 6 months to a year of their exercise program. So we have the variety shmari, not exactly a great idea for beginners. Now all of a sudden, when we're talking about people who are intermediate advanced, 6 months, year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, then all of a sudden I'm a huge fan of variety. Why? You don't have any of these problems. You have this skill. You now have had 6 months, year, 2 years to learn the skill of exercise. You can learn a lot of exercise skills in 2 years because, again, exercise is simple, say, compared to other sports like tennis and basketball and so forth, right? You have, in my experience, the ability to make use of the fact that the bicep has a long head and a short head, that the tricep has a long head and a lateral head, and I'll get into a tricep video later, and a medial head, right? You can actually take advantage of that. It's not like just tricep does tricep. You can actually use all the different muscles through all the different ranges and planes of motion. Yes, muscles work through different planes and ranges of motion. And for an intermediate and advanced, this is very important, especially if your goal is maximal development of a muscle. Yes, you still have to progressively overload the muscle. If you're doing a 5-pound dumbbell here, here, and here, it's not going to matter a year later. But if you're doing a 25-pound dumbbell a year later, here, here, and here, I know there's no resistance there, you'd have to use a cable, just work with me here. You're going to have a much, much more developed arm because not only do you practice progressive resistance, you've practiced progressive resistance through every range and plane that the muscle works in, which is going to maximize your development from a muscle building standpoint, right? And also, by the time you're intermediate and advanced, you're going to have developed some weaknesses. Right? It's just a part of the way it is. Not everyone's built the same. That's why I said this before. There's no such thing as a shoe store called size 10. That's why tailors exist. That's why very few people just go buy a suit off the rack, because not everybody is built the same. This is why Hollywood people who go to the Oscars hire stylists. Right? You see it when the women come in the gowns and dresses. They're not all wearing the same gown and dress. And some of them look awful because they're wearing things that aren't appropriate for their body. Not everyone is built the same. And that becomes very, very apparent the more advanced you become in weight training. So you have to find things that work around your individual weaknesses. And not just individual weaknesses, let's get a little positive here. Also around your strengths. Right? People not only are weak, they're also strong. So you want to also not only make up for your weaknesses, you also want to emphasize your strengths. You're not going to know that till you're in an intermediate or advanced. In the beginning, everything is weak. You don't have any weaknesses because you are a weakness. I don't mean that as a personal character slight. You know what I mean. Everything on your body needs improvement. Whereas in the intermediate and advanced, you start finding specific areas that need more improvement than others, or certain exercises you just can't do based on your structure or your past injuries. And that kind of goes into the last part of this of using variety, the exceptions to it. If someone comes into the gym to me just from the beginning, they've got injuries, I know I don't like a lot of variety, but I've got to sometimes work around that specific injury by using different ranges and planes of motion to work the same damn muscle. If I know in the Shank system of exercise, that we do one exercise for chest, one exercise for back, one exercise for shoulders, one exercise for front of the thigh, back of the thigh, bicep, tricep. I'm sorry, I wish I could make things more complex and confuse the hell out of you, but my exercise system is just that simple because it has to be. If you do one exercise for each of those muscle groups and you work between 6 to 9 sets every 7 days, spread out evenly over the 7 days, as a beginner, jump that number from 9 to 12 for an intermediate, and then 12 to 16, maybe as high as 20 for an advanced. The arms will still stay around 12 to 16, as will the shoulders, probably more around 12. It's that simple. The hardest challenge I have is as people get stronger, you've got to find ways to progressively overload them without adding weight to the bar all the time. You've got to figure out how to work around injuries, weaknesses, and strengths. That's the complexity of this thing. But injury is a reality. Sometimes people hurt themselves outside the gym. Client gets hurt in a ski accident. Now all of a sudden the overhead presses I used to do don't work anymore because they've got a fusion in their neck. Or a client goes out and they hurt their back because all of a sudden they're physically strong enough to go out and do stuff. They go hiking, they fall down the hill, they hurt their back, and now all of a sudden I can't load their spine with a bar or a weight up front. So I need variety to work around people's injuries, either what they come into the gym with or what they develop over time. Boredom. This is not one of my favorite ones, simply because a lot of times while I agree, I have to meet the client where they're at. And I say have to because I do have a bit of a control freak streak to me. I have to meet the client where they're at. I also can't have someone come in and dictate terms to me. A perfect example of these people who are neurotic about turning every exercise session into cardio. They come and they tell you, oh, I know what a real workout is. And meanwhile, you're looking at them, you're like, I really don't think you do, all due respect. Right? And so every single exercise has got to have 2 to 3 minutes of cardio thrown in because they know that's the way you work out. Granted, they don't have the skill on the 2 strength training exercises that they demand gets paired with, for some reason, jumping rope all the time, right? But again, you got to meet people where they're at. And sometimes people get bored. My solution to that? Especially for a beginner, I know they don't have the skill, I know they don't have the separation, and I know I need some form of focus. If you're doing this, you're telling me with this, you have a problem with that, I'll just stay in the same range or plane of motion and do an exercise around that. So I won't replace a bench press with an incline bench press. I may replace a bench press with a slightly inclined bench press, or I might replace a bench press with a seated machine bench press, and I might go from a free motion, more cable type, to a techno gym, more fixed type, to a Kaiser pneumatic type, to a, I don't actually know if that's pneumatic, but whatever, to a Kaiser type, right? Or a single arm cable chest press. Everything is the same plane and range of motion. I just kind of changed the machine or the piece of equipment we were using. So that's kind of one way I manage the skill component while still working around people's need for variety and to keep out boredom. But this is a really tough one because, again, I'm rambling a little here, but it's kind of a frustrating one. Really, if you're serious about what you're doing, this is one you might have to seriously reconsider. Anyway, we're getting too much shank baggage on that one. Let's move on. And then, obviously, the last one is $15 hookers. Now, anyone who knows the movie Blades of Glory will know what I'm talking about, the $15 hookers, where Craig T. Nelson comes up to Chaz Michaels, played by Will Ferrell, and he says to him, yeah, you're getting a lot of satisfaction out of those $15 hookers. And Chaz Michaels says, I'm never satisfied. It's a curse. Right? Well, some people are satisfied with $15 hookers. Right? There are some people who, even when they get to intermediate or advanced, don't need a ton of variety. Perfect example of that is people who like to powerlift. Right? That sport is comprised of 3 different exercises. And unless you're working around a specific weakness, it really doesn't pay very much to have a ton of variety, especially for someone in the intermediate phase. So some people are never satisfied. They are the Chaz Michaels when it comes to the $15 hookers. And some people, I'll put the movie clip so you know what I'm talking about. And some people, they're satisfied. Look, I have clients, and this is hard for the neurotic, insane, wacko exercise people to understand this, but I have clients who never go beyond the basic intermediate phase where they're doing maybe 9 to 12 sets per week per muscle group. I have clients who can get a leg press up to 2 to 3 times body weight, And they are completely satisfied with the degree of muscle tone. They are completely satisfied with the degree of strength. They don't feel like putting any more time, energy, or effort into their exercise routine because it's done for them what it needs to do for them. This is that Esikovian philosophy, right? Jeff Esikoff. The philosophy of we do what we do in the gym for what we do outside. That's our priority. He says it way better than I do. We do what we do in here for what we do out there. Some people, exercise neurotics, they're like that. They use the gym to a means to an end. The gym is not their end, right? So at a certain point, I don't need a ton of variety because they've got movements that work for them. They're really just kind of, God forbid, maintaining what they're doing. And by the way, all you people who want to be the next Mr. Universe, this is, again, a Lyle McDonald, Mike Boyle quote directly, which I found to be 100% true after 23 years of doing this. After about 3 to 5 years, you're going to make about 90% of your progress in the gym on a solid, consistent routine. It takes some people 5 to 10 years to figure out how to get on a solid, consistent routine. Now, if they watch my videos. But it's going to take people time, right? And in about 3 to 5 years, you're kind of there. So you've kind of got your own $15 hooker at that point. Whether you like it or not, you have to be satisfied with it unless you're going to put a disproportionate amount of work to get very little return. So that's all I have to say for today. This video has already rambled on for 15 minutes. I can't make it too long or Martina won't watch it. Martina has said to my face, Shank, I'm not going to watch all that. Just tell me what's in the video. So I don't know if I got to start making some 30-second videos, which I think literally would kill me. I think I would drop dead if I had to explain myself in 30 seconds or less. So let's just sum it up. Again, variety schmariety. I'm not a huge fan of beginners using variety. They don't have the skill to make the use of the exercise. They can't even separate the muscle groups themselves into the different divisions, in my experience. And they really need more focus. They need to focus on specific things, not have their brain all over the place. For intermediate to advanced, variety can actually be an incredible positive tool based on all the different planes and ranges and different strengths and weaknesses that people develop the longer they're working out. And again, it's like anything. There are exceptions. Look, I've said this before. Excuse my language. I'm not trying to start a goddamn religion here. I don't want a bunch of shankaholics going out there and doing what I say is right. We already have enough douches in the dietary world that do that. The last thing we need is for me to do that. And I can't even pull it off. I got too low of a budget to convince anybody of anything. So remember, there's exceptions. Working around injuries, they're going to happen whether you're lucky or not. Stuff just happens. Right? That's life. Some people, okay, you got to meet them where they're at. One thing about this is, now I've had a chance to calm down about it, is usually the people that are the most pushing they want a lot of variety. Once they start seeing the results they get from the gym, they understand that they need a certain degree of consistency to practice and exercise to get better enough at it. They kind of sell themselves on this one, right? And then the last one is that $15 hooker. Some people are never satisfied, so no matter what I said here, they're always going to want variety. And some people are satisfied. At a certain point, variety becomes a moot point because, again, they're not, and I know this sounds negative because in a lot of ways people can be lunatics. And I guess if you're going to be a lunatic, being a lunatic in the gym is way better than being a lunatic with guns and alcohol and drugs. But if there are just some people who don't take the gym as seriously as other people, they don't have to. Right? Because the gym does everything it needs to do for them at a certain point. They don't have to make this a master's degree or a doctorate degree in all the different ranges and planes of motion they can use. So that's it. I'm rambling. That's all. That's variety schmariety. Thank you for attending, and I'll see you next week.